So we hear producers talk a lot about compression, equalization, multiband dynamics, limiters, gates, the list goes on. So in today's video, we're going to take a look at the audio effects tab in Ableton, and we're going to go over some of this stuff. Let's go. All right, so I've got a few tracks open here. I've got a rhythm guitar clip, a couple lead clips, one synthesizer clip, and one vocal clip. I got this synth clip and this vocal clip from some plugins I have. And as you can see, we have no effects in these tracks. In the synth and vocal, all we have is the plugin that I use to record this clip. So if you come over here to your audio effects tab, you're going to notice all these different folders. The first tip I want to show you, if you don't want to see these folders and you just want to see every individual audio effect, you can right click on any single one of these. You'll see group and folder, click that, and it will list everything out individually. As you can see, we have a lot of effects in here. I'm not going to be going over every single one of these today, but I would like to go over some of the more common ones and show you how to use them. Me personally, I like to see the folders, so I'm going to switch this back. Some of the things we're going to highlight today are compressors, EQs, multiband dynamics, gates, and limiters. We're also going to touch on a little bit of reverb, delay, and this drive and color folder here. Since I have a guitar clip already in here, I'm going to show you guys the drive and color folder. We have amp, cabinet, drum bass, tubes, all kinds of overdrives, a lot of different effects here. This is how I recorded it with no effects. Another quick tip, if you're recording in the clip slots and you record a lot more than needed, after you pick out your loop, you can simply right-click in the loop you've selected, and you can click crop sample. Now you've gotten rid of all the extra that you don't need. So now you can work with just the clip that you want. So you've heard the raw sound. Let's drag in an amp and a cabinet and see what happens. All right, let's hear it again. So you can tell there's a big difference. You've got some different options in here for different cabinets. You can also pick if you want it to simulate your microphone near the amp, far, or just off axis. In the amp section, you have clean, boost, blues, rock. You've got a lot of different options. You've also got bass, mids, trebles, presence knob, and a gain knob. Again, remember you can always group your effects chain. I'm going to click this one. I'm going to hold shift, and I'm going to click this one. Right click, group. So now I can turn both of these off and on at the same time. So here's our sample without the sound. And here's our sample with the sound. Much cleaner. Now, before we move on, something I want to go over really quick. If you click in any of these folders, notice like under the cabinet folder, I've got all these different options here. Each one of these is nothing more than a template of this. I could simply just drag in the one that says cabinet, and that's going to give me the default settings for cabinet. This also applies to everything else, compression, EQ. So for example, I'll come down here to EQ and filters, EQ 8. Notice we have a lot of different options. These are nothing more than templates of the actual EQ 8. So I can drag in an EQ 8. Here's the default. I can drag in one of these. It's just a pre-made template of this. So keep that in mind. I think it makes it simpler because when you're looking through these folders, you have so many options to work with here. So if you think of it this way, it makes it a little simpler. I'm going to delete these. Next, I want to talk to you guys about noise gates. So I'm going to come in here to Dynamics, Gate, and I'm going to drag this into this lead slot here. So we're going to drag in the gate. All a noise gate does is it filters out sounds below a certain threshold. The only thing you have to be careful with when using a noise gate is not to filter out your actual sound. If you set this too high, again, you're going to start filtering out your sound. Say you're in a loud room and there's perhaps an AC or something like that going in the background and you'll notice that signal coming in. You can always just set this noise gate and filter that sound out. I'm going to get rid of this. Now we're going to go into some compression. So I'm just going to drag in a generic compressor into the lead guitar slot. So first, you've got a couple different views here. You can work in any of these three views that you want. They just lay out the information a little differently. I like to work in this one. As you notice in this audio file, these spots are much higher, these spots are much lower. With the compressor, all you're doing, you're taking these high spots and lowering the volume ever so slightly, and for the low spots, you're increasing it, just to get a more even sound, hence compression. Also, I'm going to add in my amplifier and cabinet group, and I'm going to add that to the lead guitar as well. Always remember, any effects you put down here in the bottom go in order. Your signal's coming through from left to right. So I'm actually going to do my amp before the compressor. So I'm going to quickly go through a couple of these settings here. Ratio, all this means is that if you have a 4 dB signal coming in, you're going to get a 1 dB signal coming out. It's simply the ratio of what's coming in versus what's coming out. The higher you have this set, the more gain reduction you're going to see. So we're going to set this at a 2-to-1 ratio. So we also have threshold. Now this number is going to be at what volume does the compression kick in. If I have this set to negative 11.6, we're not going to get any compression until the sound reaches this number. Attack is how fast the compression kicks in once the sound reaches this threshold. And the release is the opposite of attack. After the sound drops below this threshold, this is how long it takes for the compression to stop. All right, so let's hear it without the compressor. Now let's hear it with the compressor. Hopefully you can notice how much more even the sound is, especially on that initial pick. Also, you might notice that the overall sound is a little quieter with the compressor on. And this also gets much quieter the more gain reduction we have. So if I turn this threshold down a lot more, notice how the sound gets quieter. That's the point of this makeup gain here. So by adding makeup gain, we're getting this sound back to its original level. And under the generic compressor in Ableton, you also have this out, which you can add additional gain to your sound. Also, don't forget about this tab over here in the bottom left. Now, any effect you bring in, as you hover over these different options, it's going to give you a description of what these are. Keep that in mind. It's really useful. There's a lot of ways to go about this. You can even compress in stages. The only thing I would be careful about is over-compressing your sound. Next, let's talk about equalization. So I'm going to come down here to the EQ tab, and we see EQ8. Let's jump into the synth sound. I'm going to drag an EQ8 in. Here's our default settings. So when you're looking at an EQ, this whole thing, this is your frequency spectrum. You've got 100 hertz and below, your low range, 100 to 1,000, your mid range, and you have 1 to 10,000, your high range. So all these settings on the left are attached to whichever number you currently have highlighted. If I click 3, here's my settings for 3. If I click 2, here's my settings for 2. If you notice down here, I can get rid of one by just clicking this box. This tab here determines the shape of how I'm going to be adjusting the frequencies. Here's your Q function. So if I'm using this shape and I turn the Q down, you can see that I'm going to be adjusting a lot more of the frequency spectrum this way with just this. So if there's a frequency in one small spot that I don't want, I can turn this Q up, turn it down, and that'll get rid of it or filter it out. So for frequency and gain, you can adjust this by just dragging the number. Q, you'll have to manually come over and change. So I'm going to change 1 to this shape here. This is pretty common for a vocal. If you have a lot of low end on your audio, this is a good way to just get rid of that low end or muddy frequencies. You can also do this with the high end. Notice what happens when I cut out all the low end and the high end. And you can adjust this however you'd like. So on the last tab, I actually have a vocal. Now this is a pre-mixed vocal. I got it from this arcade plugin. So for this one, let's actually use one of these templates. Let's do this telephone vocal.
I can't deny what I see, what I see.
So as you can see, this is nothing more than a template of the basic EQ8. However, they already have it set to where all the highs are out, a lot of the lows are out, and they're only using these frequencies that you would typically hear like over a telephone. So we have not made many adjustments to all of these samples, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to duplicate this group, and in this group, I'm going to turn off all the effects that we've dragged in so far. And I'm going to let you hear how all these sounds sound together without the effects and how they sound with the effects.
I can't deny what I see, what I see. I can't deny what I see, what I see. I can't deny what I see, what I see. I can't deny what I see, what I see.
So next we're going to go over multiband dynamics and limiters. Let's drag in a limiter. We're going to drag this in on the lead guitar slot here. So when you drag in your limiter, you're going to see ceiling. Whatever your ceiling is set to, it's not going to allow the sound to go above this number. You also have this look ahead button, and that's just how quickly it's going to respond if your sound reaches this ceiling. All right, multiband dynamics. Since we've already went over compression and EQ, multiband dynamics is nothing more than putting the two together in a sense. So up here, you've got your high frequencies, mids, and your lows. So with multiband dynamics, we're simply compressing just these parts of the frequency spectrum. We're not taking these frequencies out as if we're EQing. We're just compressing this part of the frequency range. So we're going to drag this out. I'm going to drag this down to add compression, and this is how it sounds. And really quickly, I'm just going to touch on reverb and delay. We're going to drag in some reverb to this rhythm guitar here. The other way to go about this is create a send track with reverb in it. And the Ableton default already has this for you, and it's in the A spot. So I could just turn this A up and I can add reverb that way. This works the same with delay. Let's come over here to our vocal track and add a delay. So I could add the delay directly to the track, or I could use the send track.
I can't deny what I see, what I see. I can't deny what I see, what I see. I can't deny what I see, what I see.
Again, I know there's just so many options in here to work from, but hopefully you've got a better understanding of how to use some of these things now. The most important thing, get in there, try them out, see what you can do. Till next time, peace.